Hello, this is Gonzalo Lira speaking to you live, and welcome to the Roundtable. This is edition number 12, and I am joined today by two very interesting people that I'm very happy to see again. On the case of Maria Dubovikova. Maria, how's it going?
Thanks for joining us. Great. Good evening, everybody.
She is a broadcaster based in Moscow, Russia, and she is an expert commentator insofar as the Middle East situation is concerned. But now she's returned to Moscow, and she's broadcasting from there. And in Los Angeles, I have Kim Iversen. Kim, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. Thank you for being on the Roundtable.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good morning for where I am. I know it's evening for you guys, but it's morning for me.
Yeah, we were joking about that before the show started, that I'm drunk already,
so, and I need some wine. I'm like, okay, it's 11, right? So that it's past 5 o'clock somewhere. It's where you guys
are. Yeah, somewhere it's okay to drink. Yes, exactly. But yeah, because I'm drunk, and so any foolishness I say, I hope that these two wonderful guests will bail me out. And the thing is, by the way, we're also going to be joined by Catherine D, who's default friend. She unfortunately had a little IRL situation, but as soon as she's able to get out of it, she'll be popping onto the show.
It almost sounds like you're saying IRS problem, and it's like, oh, wouldn't that be?
Oh yeah, well yeah. Now that we got 87,000 new agents coming our way, what do you think of that, by the way?
I mean, obviously they're going after the middle class. They're not going to go after the wealthy or the corporations like they claim, because those guys are armed to the teeth with tax attorneys and accountants and wealth managers, and they're all getting away with paying very little legally. So there's nothing to go after there. The people that are evading taxes illegally are often people that are not realizing they're evading taxes, and also they're broke. I mean, they're working a gig job, and they're barely making ends meet, that they feel like I can't afford to give the government 30% of my $20. But that's who they're going after, the gig economy. I mean, it's just such a sham.
Yeah, because I mean, it seems that they're just abusing people who are powerless. I mean, that's the attitude of a bully, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Maria, how do you see it? I don't know if you're following the situation, because for those of you who might not know, and those of you who are not in the United States or following American politics, the Biden administration just announced that they are going to hire 87,000 Internal Revenue Service agents. Now, the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, is the U.S. tax authority. 87,000 new agents. Kim, correct me if I'm wrong. It's going to be over the next 10 years?
It's 10 years. They're spending $80 billion on it. But I'm curious, in Russia, Maria, do you guys have a tax police that go around and shake you down for cash?
No.
What is it? But you pay really high taxes there, don't you?
No. Actually, the tax system here is quite flexible, and really it's not as dramatic in Europe, as I have been living there. I know how kind of taxes people are paying. Here, situation is much easier, because we have, in terms of business, it's like various ways to pay less taxes. Let's say if you are individual entrepreneur, you just pay 6% from your income, and that's it. Like there is taxes on the property, taxes on salary, but they are all like really moderate, and it's not as it's not very much. Also, in terms of police, there is like checkups from the tax services as well. But for example, now they have really elevated everything. They make it much easier, and nobody is terrorizing now the companies, and also they made it such a kind of system that it is purely cyber system, so you can pay taxes right from your from your notebook, and I mean PC or whatever, and it's just really very easy. So it's easier to pay than not to pay, honestly, and in terms of documentation as well.
Let me ask you something, because in the United States, what everybody is terrified of is an audit. An audit is where the IRS agent, they go out and they look at all of your accounts to see if you've been up to date, if you'd paid, and all the rest of it. And is there something like that in Russia?
The audit exists for the big companies with a huge income, for sure. But in case of the small companies and individual entrepreneurs, no, such things do not exist at all. And plus, for example, if you don't pay, let's say if you are missing a certain moment when you had to even pay taxes, also to provide the tax office with the documentation, they will just lock your account because they see everything online. And if the moment you provide them with the documentation and the moment you pay the taxes, so they will open the accounts again. It's very easy.
It sounds like it. By the way, default friend, Catherine D, is finally with us. Catherine, how's it going? Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too. I forgot that I have this dorky anime avatar set. That was for GeoStream.
Yeah, I'm not on I'm not on camera myself because I'm suffering through kidney stones. This is just boring trivia, and so I have to change my position every like 3 minutes to find a comfortable position. It's just the most awkward thing, and so just forgive me that I'm not on camera. But anyway, we were talking about the situation with the IRS. You're in the United States, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and what's the vibe on the ground about this whole notion of 87,000 new IRS agents and they're really going after the rich people this time? Does anybody believe that or what?
I mean, why would they need 87,000 new people if they're only going after wealthy people? They're probably going after people who have crypto, everyone who's been doing like rando freelance work because they work remotely. I mean, I know a lot of people who do a lot of like I know people who have multiple full-time jobs, and I'm sure they're not paying their taxes properly. I think that's pretty common.
Why is it? What do you mean? How do they get away with having a full-time job and not paying their taxes fully?
I think it depends on the nature of the employment. You could be like a full-time contractor, and then it's up to you to sort your taxes out.
Yeah, if you're a 1099.
Yeah, I've been in different contracting roles, and the first year I was in California, I was a contractor, and I didn't realize I was paying the wrong state's taxes like the whole time. It's just like I ended up paying a bunch of back taxes because I'm terrified of being audited. But that such things can happen deliberately, right?
Yeah, but I think the question is, whether or not. So I agree that a lot of people aren't paying their taxes that are like middle class, people that are in the gig economy. But, the cost of living has skyrocketed so much that, I was looking actually just here in Los Angeles and at the price of rent, because if I'm going to expand, let's say my show, and I need to hire a producer and move them to Los Angeles, I was looking at how much would they need in order to at least afford a 2-bedroom apartment. Right. And they would need to make about $100,000 a year. I mean,
wow.
Yeah. Because rent, you can't get a 2-bed and that's not even living in a nice part of LA. That's living in not a bad area. You don't want to force them to live in a bad area, but it's an area that isn't considered, like nice. It's just kind of an area, right? Safe enough, some crime.
Yeah, middle class, middling. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and it still costs, to get a 2-bedroom apartment, you're looking at $3,000 a month. So if you multiply that by 3 to give somebody a gross income, you're getting up to $100,000 a year, and that is for just anybody that you're going to hire. I mean, so people can't afford, and of course they're not making that much. People aren't being hired for $100,000; they're being hired for $50,000 less. So they're getting studio apartments, or they're having to split rent with people, and they don't feel like they can make ends meet. So when they're being squeezed, they're doing these gig jobs, these side jobs, in order to make up for the fact that the cost of living is skyrocketed and incomes have not matched that. So what do? They evade the man. But then the question is, should the man be squeezing them?
Yeah, exactly. Because it seems grossly unfair that, first of all, you can't make ends meet even though you are working the hours. I mean, we should be living in a society such where if you are putting in the work and putting in the effort, then you should be able to live with dignity. I mean, nobody wants a mansion or anything like that. But, an honest day's pay for an honest day's labor ought to be able to give you honest living insofar as home, food, entertainment, the basic entertainment, nothing extravagant. And so it doesn't seem that that's even possible anymore. And on top of that, this whole notion of squeezing out these people who are juggling 2 or 3 gig jobs, it just seems grossly unfair. That's the thing, especially when so many people made so much goddamn money over the past, 12 or 14 years, basically since the global financial crisis.
Mhm.
And everybody got bailed out who was connected, who was plugged in, and regular working people are getting screwed. I don't get the mentality. And I don't understand why in the United States there isn't a revolution, if you ask me.
We might be headed in that direction. I mean, when people realize that they're being squeezed by the man and they can't even afford a 2-bedroom a 2-bedroom. We're not even, I mean, when I was a kid growing up, you could be a blue collar worker and have a wife and a stay-at-home spouse and 3 kids and afford a home, an actual house, not a 2-bedroom apartment.
Kim, sorry to interrupt. In the 90s, The Simpsons, look at their house. They had 3 kids, and a stay-at-home mom and a moron as the breadwinner, and they had a fairly nice house, right?
I mean, isn't the joke about that?
It was
that's
considered,
that
it was
Homer's
considered
role,
typical. What?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Isn't the joke that like Homer's role would like net like $250,000 a year or something?
Well, early
No,
on
I
when the
don't
show
think-
was new, it was considered typical. Okay, later on, as the economic situation deteriorated, then they started making that joke.
Right, but there's still upper middle. Like, remember, what was it, Tom Grimes? Right, that the whole thing about Grimy is he didn't understand why Homer had a job that had as an upper middle class job.
I actually have never watched Homer Simpson.
I didn't think he had. I thought his job was at a factory.
He works at a nuclear power plant.
Right. So
Yeah.
he worked. Okay. Right. So, but what is he? I mean, I thought he's wearing a hard hat and stuff. I mean, he's not
Like a
he's not
nuclear
an
engineer.
executive.
Yeah.
Maybe if he's the engineer. I thought he was just watching to make sure they don't blow up.
Yeah, but the point remains that in the 90s, you could have a single breadwinner and a fairly stable home, and nothing. You didn't have to be a rocket scientist or some arbitrage specialist at some investment bank, and you could
Even
have
then,
a
you
decent
can't.
life.
And even if you do have a job like that, here in Los Angeles, you still can't afford to live in a normal house like or a house anything like The Simpsons. I mean, it's become insane. And the reality is, there's plenty of money in America. We've got plenty of money going in to the government for them to be spending how they want. And of course, what do they choose to do with it? War, right? They choose to send weapons to Ukraine on a monthly basis. We're
Financial aid.
Yeah, right. I mean, we're spending money in Israel. We're spending money everywhere. And yet the average American cannot have a middle-class life anymore, working full time. That is crazy. And yet, it comes down to blaming the gig workers who aren't paying their taxes. Those people aren't paying their taxes for a reason. And that should be asked why. Not, well, they better pay their taxes. It should be, maybe they're not for a reason, because you can't live the American dream anymore and pay the man at the same time.
Well,
And that is what causes revolutions, by the way. It usually does come down to taxation.
Yeah. What it is too also is that the basic unfairness of doing everything that you can to survive and playing by the rules, quote unquote, and getting absolutely nowhere. And I think that people are becoming more and more hopeless. I follow a lot of channels on YouTube that are basically of what one would consider working class, lower middle class people who vent on their YouTube channels. And these channels have, most of them have less than 500 subscribers. And I pay attention to them to see sort of like the vibe of the people. And the vibe is just frustration and resignation. And I'm like, what the hell happened in America? I mean, Catherine, what do you think? Where was the wrong turn made?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know anything about politics, and I don't even think about my own finances, if I'm being honest.
It's probably a good way to go.
Yeah,
Like, whatever.
I mean, I just
It'll
don't make
magic
enough.
itself. Yeah. Well, I'm
Right,
sorry?
I'm like, you reach a point where you're like so poor that you don't like, it's not even worth thinking about, right? You just sort of, I don't know, hope you don't overdraft. So I'm kind of, I'm one of those people. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess the 90s, but millennials have never made enough. We definitely still have an upper middle class, but they work in jobs like finance or certain parts of tech. Not even everyone in tech makes enough money. Rent is high, but that's not the only thing that's high, right? Just the cost of living, period.
Where do you live? What
I live
city?
in Chicago.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The
And
big
what's the
cities. But people are leaving the big cities because they're trying to get it, go places where cost of living is lower so that they can actually afford things. But then where I'm from, Boise, Idaho, for example, has been flooded with people from California trying to escape to the smaller towns to have a decent life. And all it did was it ruined it for the actual people from Boise because they can't afford now to be in their own hometown.
Yeah, and they bring the problems from California to Boise, I bet.
Well, it's the financial problems for sure. I mean, they definitely, and yeah, more crime, but but that I think happens as a population grows. You're just going to get higher rates of crime. But certainly the money issue is a big one. I mean, if you're born and raised in Boise, good luck trying to be able to afford a house anywhere in Boise. The Californians have come in and jacked up the prices so high that
Yeah.
no one's salary matches the price of the homes. It's just that these people from California have sold their homes and they bring in large chunks of cash to put towards these houses. So it
Yeah.
drives the prices up. So it's like it's ruining it. So you can't even flock to the smaller cities anymore to try to get relief.
Yeah, because I've noticed that all of the cool smaller cities, third and fourth tier towns in population size, right? All of them that had like a certain flavor to them or a certain something, they've all been flooded by these
Yeah.
Californians and Oregonians and Washingtonians who and the worst part is that, see, they hate California, they move out to Austin, and then they start voting for the same kinds of programs that made them flee their previous state. I mean, like, oh, what the hell? They didn't learn anything. That's the bizarre part, as far as I'm concerned. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I moved from Austin, Texas to LA. And so I went the other way than what most people are where they're going. They're going that way. But yeah, it is, people move to Austin and they say, well, I'm used to all the amenities of Los Angeles, so I want all of those same amenities. So the good thing is they start to bring in all of their like shopping and restaurants, like all that stuff starts to build up because the people that live there miss it. They want it. There's a demand for it. But yeah, they do tend to vote. But when you're living in Texas, for example, I mean, it's so red that there are some policies where it's like it would be helpful to have a dose of blue coming in a little bit. Like, for example, they can evict you in 3 days in Texas. 3
Mhm.
days. If you don't pay your rent, you're 3 days late, they can lock you out of your place. Like, that's a bit intense. I mean, give somebody at least 30 days. I mean,
Well, I don't
here
know. I mean, I kind of like agree with that. I
3
mean,
days, if you're 3
yeah.
days late on your rent, you're just going to lock the person out. I mean, people fall on hard times. There's just, especially now with inflation and taxation and these 87,000 IRS agents, like what are people going to do?
It's that I guess what happens is that in my own case, I always pay my rent on time. And so this notion of like, oh yeah, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, or not being able to evict somebody at all, as happened during the COVID lockdowns, I think it's unfair because a lot of times, the owner of the place is paying a mortgage, and he's got responsibilities. It's not that he's just sitting on a mountain of money. So I suppose
No,
what
I
happens.
understand. Yeah. But at the same time, like, we can't say we understand that people are being squeezed and now the IRS is going to squeeze them more when they don't really have money and there's a high cost of living. But then at the same time, say those same people should be evicted after 3 days when they can't make their rent.
Well, no, I don't see any contradiction in my own case because my thinking is the 87,000 IRS agents are just trying to squeeze a little more juice out of an already squeezed orange. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Whereas, if you have a commitment insofar as rent is concerned, then you should live up to that. perhaps there should be some sort of mechanism by which you can say, look, I'm going to be late with the rent because of circumstances, and I need a postponement or some sort of deferral, some sort of system in that regard, rather than it be like a surprise, I'm not paying today, right? But the notion of just, months and months passing, because the thing is, see, I don't have a problem with 30 days late, but we all know it's never going to be 30 days late. It becomes 60, 90, 120 days late or more even. Okay.
Well, it kind of depends. But Maria, I'm curious, in Russia, what happens if you don't pay your rent? Can they just kick you out?
Putin comes to your house and shoots
Yeah, what happens?
Like I'm listening, I'm really shocked about all these revelations, because we're not that much into the domestic policies of the United States, and few people are following such things. Because still, United States have been investing much money to make this PR and understanding of the United States as a kind of a dream or something prosperous and something to be desired for and to dream about. Regarding Russia, it's first, it's always a matter between the person who is giving the flat for rent and the person who takes it. So it always makes some kind of a deal and personal attachment. Russians are very particular people. They are always trying to get into other situation. And so if a person is unable to pay in time, so they try to find a deal and to solve this issue. It's not also they're giving time to leave, they're giving time to, even if the person understands that he cannot afford this flat anymore, he asks permission to stay for a while before he finds another flat. And it's always a kind of personal discussion, personal decision between the two people. It's nothing about the government or whatever, never. It's just a matter between the two people who are deciding what to do.
But how often, certainly that's kind of the case, in like a place like Texas, for example, where you legally have the right to put a lock on someone's door after 3 days as the person who's renting them the flat, but you don't have to. You can certainly do that. It's your choice. So you could work it out with your renter and say, okay, I know you can't pay this month. Like, how about we go if how long do you need? Do you need a couple of weeks? And they could certainly work it out. But the problem is in America is that a lot of these apartments are rented by large corporations that you cannot have that conversation with. They just kick you out. So there is no, you lose that like person to person sympathy, right? So it's just, you're kicked out. Like, that's it. The corporation doesn't care about you. Like maybe the landlord in Russia, from what I'm understanding. So I'm just curious where you are, like how often does a person then, they try to work it out. They want to work it out. They don't, but they can't, the landlord just says, get out.
Frankly speaking, I know many people in my, in my circle of communication who are renting the flats, and then I never heard any problem related to this thing.
Okay.
So everybody's paying in time. Everybody is trying to find the flat that will be perfectly matching their salaries. So it's always a kind of something easy, and especially the flats are not expensive here for rent, and there are lots, and you can find any in any area, whatever you like, whatever you need. So
Maria, if you don't mind my asking, you live in Moscow, and so let me ask you, how much is a 2-bedroom apartment in a nice area? Not like the top rich people's place, but like a decent place with good transportation. How much could you expect to pay rent per month?
The problem that the goods area with good transportation is a description of most of the part of Moscow, because with the new mayor, they have solved most of the problems in terms of transportation and made all the areas very comfortable for living. But let's say the average price here there are areas, let's say in the central city, I'm living in the center, they're quite expensive for rent, but if you go a little bit further to the suburbs, it will be around, let's say, $500, $600
for a 2-bedroom. What's expensive to you?
2-bedroom.
Yeah.
2-bedroom.
Tell me what's expensive in the center of the city. I'm dying to know. Like, if you're living in the middle of it, what is a 2-bedroom apartment going to cost you?
For example, in the house I'm living, the 2-bedroom flats here are getting $1,000.
And you're like right in the middle of it all.
Sorry.
Like
$1,000 is what many people pay for internet in the United States.
I pay for internet. I still speak serious. I'll pay for internet $5.
Oh, what?
A month.
How much
Yes.
is your cell phone?
Cell phone. For cell phone, okay, let me. Around the same. Yeah.
$5 a month for your cell phone? I have to ask. I have a best friend that lives in Moscow, and I'll have to ask. I mean, she said the same thing. She moved away from LA back. She's Russian, and she moved back a couple of years ago, and she's always saying, "Oh, Kim, it's so cheap. It's so great. I have a beautiful apartment. You know, I couldn't afford it because in LA she rented a room in an apartment, and then she goes back to Moscow and she can afford herself a big 2-bedroom, nice apartment." And she goes to nice restaurant. I mean, she's just like living the life back. I mean, she always said she was never going back to Russia. She'd be like, I'm not going back. I'm not going back. And then she went back for family reasons. She needed to go back. And she went, and now she's like, I'm never going back to the United States.
I'm trying to think here because I a few months ago I paid for the year of my cell phone, and it was unlimited data and 500 minutes or 300 minutes. I mean, so many minutes that I wouldn't use them, right? And it was like, I honestly want to say it was like about $100 for the year.
100 for the year. I pay 140, like 145 a month.
Yeah, well, sucks to be you. What can I say?
It does. Oh my gosh. And then like
all
rent.
I have to do is eat a lot of borscht, and I pay that kind of for my cell phone. I'm sorry, I'm teasing.
I mean, it's absurd. Like, we've had rent control on the apartments since the pandemic, so they haven't been able to raise our rent. But my husband and I are about to move, and when we move, they're going to rent our 2-bedroom apartment for over $6,000 a month.
Jesus.
And we are not living in we live in a really good area for sure. And, you know, we definitely have a nice apartment, but it's not like there's definitely more expensive apartments in more expensive areas. Like, we don't live in Santa Monica. We live in Marina del Rey, which is different. That's like the poor man's beach town compared to like Santa Monica and Venice, you know, where it's even more expensive. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, what's interesting is that, you know, this price comparison, right? This kind of like gives you a taste of the fact that certain metrics that we use to compare countries one to the other don't really make any sense, because here we are. You're talking about a 2-bedroom apartment in LA that's $6,000, and Maria's talking about a top of the line apartment in Russia, in Moscow, that's going for $1,000.
No,
go ahead.
Just one remark. You can find here an apartment that will be $6,000.
But what's it going to look like?
$7,000.
Yeah, but it's going to look
in the
like
luxurious area. It will be either in the Moscow city or in just the most luxurious area close to Kremlin, in the historical building or whatever, with the luxurious, decorations, etc.
Right. Yeah.
But you can find this. You can find various. There are various options.
Well, the ones like that here are more like 20 grand a month. You know?
Sure. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. It's like on the Wilshire Towers, like, for instance.
It's unbelievable how little you get for your money in a city like Los Angeles. I mean, it's depressing, actually. It's totally, I mean, our building's like falling apart and people would still pay this much. And we're just shocked that they're going to raise the rent to that level. We're just like, I mean, we don't pay anywhere close to that right now, but it's just like, wow, people are actually going to pay that much for this, where you can hear your neighbors. Like, we're hearing our neighbors constantly. You know, it's not, that's crazy.
This kind of like different kind of living like this, you know, it gives, how can I put it? Inflation has hit in the United States quite a while ago. It's only that now people are starting to notice, because you're saying that you were paying all kinds of money for some apartment that was in an apartment building that was kind of like, you know, run down, or a bit it was a little bit in disrepair, where you could hear your neighbors. So it's not really a top tier place, and you're paying through the nose for it, to the point that it actually hurts your pocketbook, right? And you know, this has been going on for too long. It's like, I don't know. I mean, Catherine, bail me out here. What do you have to say for all of this?
Geez, I feel like this is the worst. This is totally out of my wheelhouse because I mean, I'm in a pretty unique situation. I'm in a cheap city. I have barely any income. I live really cheaply. Um, a lot of the inflation that's that's happening hasn't really hit the Midwest in the same way yet. So my perspective is going to be totally different. I think I'd probably have more meaningful input if I was in like New York, or even if I was in even if I was outside of the Midwest. The Midwest is pretty affordable, even for, like Chicago, even for a big city, I think.
That's because everybody's afraid to move to Chicago right now. Everything in the news makes us go, gosh, you just don't want to even visit. They make it sound like it's the most dangerous place in America.
Is it the most dangerous place in America?
I don't think so. I mean, there's definitely crime here. I mean, I don't know if there's more crime here than there was in the Bay Area. I mean, it is more affordable. Like in the nice neighborhood, you could be paying $6,000 a month for a 2-bedroom or something. In the sort of like mid-tier yuppie neighborhoods, it's closer to 3,000 or 2,500. But you could still get a studio here for 800 a month.
Wow, you could not find anything in LA for. I mean, I'm telling you, the apartments I looked at that were like 2,000 a month. I mean, 3,000 a month for a basic 2-bedroom. I mean, we're talking basic, like look like some Motel 6 on the outside kind of a thing.
Okay.
Like not, old style building from the 40s or early 50s, no air conditioning. You have to have a wall air conditioning unit. There's no amenity, it's very thin walls, single pane windows kind of a thing. And that's what you get for $3,000 a month in LA, in not even a central area of LA. You'd have to drive to get to anywhere fun.
Yeah, I mean, your dollar goes further in the Midwest. I think for obvious reasons. I see people in the chat are saying to get shot. I mean, the weird thing about Chicago is the crime is not evenly distributed, but every now and then in like a neighborhood that has a reputation for being like a yuppie neighborhood, like someone will just like randomly get shot, and then it'll be quiet for like, a few months. And but I don't like, how is that so much different than other parts of the country? I don't actually know.
Actually, I'm kind of curious of what it's like in Moscow. What's the crime like in Moscow, to tell you the truth? Because I have no idea, and so I'm genuinely curious.
I don't have data. I was not checking this, but to be honest, I can compare how the things were in the 90s and how they are now. And let's say, I can say, in the 90s, it was really dangerous to get out of the house after 9 o'clock. There were lots of street robberies, It was really crazy. These days, the situation is totally different, and the city has become totally safe. And the crime rate, I was checking that, I think, last year, and the crime rate is declining seriously in Moscow and St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg is always higher because of specific of the city itself and this free, absolutely atmosphere that exists there. But in Moscow, it's really getting better, much better than it was.
It's much better than it was in the 90s.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's safe, It's like you can walk at 2 o'clock in the morning. And there will be a lot of people, first of all, and also enjoying their time and their rich nightlife. And everything is safe, it's secure, and so. The biggest problem is always the traffic. Traffic accidents at night, it happens because of people are suddenly, speeding up too much, and this happens. But in terms of crime scale, it's really safe. It's good, normal, quiet city.
Wow. No, I will say, I think that rent has inflated recently. So I don't know what happened to cause it, because it's like crazy that we can't find enough workers to work. So it almost seems like there's missing people. But then at the same time, there seems like there's too many people, because rent has like totally inflated an enormous amount. The fact that they're going to spike rent here by like 50% is
what? What?
Yeah,
I mean, how did they announce this that they're going to raise it by 50%?
they don't do it if you're living in it. So if you're living in it, they can't do that. They can only raise it 5% annually or 3 to 5% annually. But the minute you move, they can then go to market rate. But we've only been living in this apartment for 2 years, and they're going to inflate it by 50% as soon as over 50%, probably.
Well, I see.
Yeah. So, but that's going on everywhere in the country. We're seeing massive rent hikes, and that clearly aren't happening in Moscow. But
no, it's interesting because let's say Moscow is the most expensive city in Russia. If you go, let's say, 1,000 kilometers from Moscow, even if you go to St. Petersburg, the prices will be 2 times less. So even to buy the flat or to rent it, it will be very cheap. If you go to other cities, smaller, also beautiful ones, Nizhny Novgorod, whatever, if you go to Siberia, the prices will be cheaper, even more. So life is the most expensive is Moscow. The rest is much, much cheaper.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, but there's something else going on about what you were saying just now, Kim. You were saying that that there aren't enough people, and what I've noticed is that, see, everybody's saying that there aren't enough people, that there are all these job openings, and yet at the same time, we have the situation of people applying for 50 jobs and not getting a single callback. It's this weird disconnect. And it's happening not just in the United States. I've been following it in Western Europe as well, that there's this bizarre disconnect, whereas it seems statistically that, the unemployment is very low, and the positions, there are empty positions, open positions, but lots of people who are trying to get work are not finding work. It's the most bizarre situation that I've noticed. It's this, because it's really unique, and to give a little background, I started my online life by commenting on finance, because I was managing money back in 2010, and it was 2008 through 2010, through the whole global financial crisis, and so I started doing a blog, sort of like airing out my ideas as to what might be happening at that time. And so I have a fairly decent grasp of the whole economic situation, but I've never seen a period whereby it seems as if there is low unemployment, that is close to full employment, and yet at the same time, so many people are complaining that they can't find jobs. There's something is going on. There's an X factor. It's like you can sense that there's like dark matter in the economy somehow. And
not only that, but another thing that doesn't make any sense at all is we know people are leaving California, right? People, because for a lot of the reasons I've shown, people are flooding out of Los Angeles, yet the rents are going up, not just up, dramatically higher. They're crazy inflation on the rent. Why is that?
I can tell you. I can tell you why that's happening. That's actually kind of easy, because you pointed out that there are a lot of these companies that are buying up a lot of rental properties. They're the ones who are raising the prices. And so what happens is that the retail investor who has bought property, they see these companies raise their rent, and so they assume that they can raise their rent too. Because inflation, the best heuristic to understand inflation is, imagine you're at a stadium watching a football game, right? And everybody's sitting down, but then the guy in front of you stands up, and so he blocks your view. And so what do you do?
Right.
You stand up, and everybody winds up standing up. See these big firms like BlackRock and Blackstone, which are two separate firms, and people don't seem to realize it. But anyway, all of these firms that are buying up all these properties to make them rentals, right? They are deliberately rising their prices because they know that the inflation is coming, so they want to lock in the better price. And it's becoming a self-reinforcing cycle. They are anticipating inflation, so they raise the rates, so everybody else raises their rates too. You see the vicious cycle going on?
Yeah, because I was genuinely shocked today when I went looking for an apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment, and saw that they were $3,000. I swear I just looked last year and they were $1,500. And I think that's actually true. I think it was just they've inflated that much in the course of 1 year. I mean, it's just absurd. And so if it is just these corporations screwing us over, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I do think there needs to be some absolute controls on that. I mean,
agree.
Housing is a necessity.
Yeah, I completely agree. I also think that the problem with the inflation of the of housing prices is because of too many mortgages. I think that the mortgage industry should have been far more regulated. And this notion that everybody should own their own home, it's a laudable goal. But if you
Oh,
put
you
your
sound like you're a World Economic Forum great resetter.
no.
That's
On
what
the
you're
contrary,
sounding like.
I'm a distributor.
You'll own nothing and you'll be happy.
No, but what happens is that, see, by having all these cheap loans, all of a sudden all these homes are have an astronomical price. Like, I can give a specific example. In the early 70s, my parents bought a home in Northridge, right? And it was a 4-bedroom with a house, 3-car garage, a
3-car
pool.
garage.
Yeah,
And this is in Northridge, and how big was it?
I don't know how many square feet, but
4-bed,
I know
3-car garage.
four bedroom, 3-car garage.
Okay. I can tell you how much that house is worth now if you tell me how much they bought it for.
Yeah, they bought it for $43,000.
What? Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Right now that house is worth probably $1.2 million.
Oh yeah,
That's
yeah. I
how
know.
much it would
Yeah.
cost to buy
But see,
a
that
house
that
big.
inflated price is because of the wide scale availability of mortgage loans, and see, because when you have a mortgage loan, the actual payment for the person is, it's so marginal between if he's taking out a loan for, say, 100,000 or 130,000. It's such a marginal difference of his monthly payment that he's like, the hell with it. I'll splurge, quote unquote. And that's what's happened. We've had this explosion of the prices of homes. The homes exist for everybody, but because of the mortgages, and the reason I'm saying this, and I hadn't really understood it until I moved to Eastern Europe, where mortgages are very difficult to get, and because of it, the prices of the properties here are much more realistic. And so you have here, I'm living in Kharkov, and which is the second largest city of Ukraine. It's comparable to a second-tier city in Russia, like, I don't know, Kursk or Yekaterinburg or something, right? And it's the prices here, for $100,000, you can get something state of the art. I mean, just really top of the line. Whereas in the United States, you cannot get a livable home for $100,000 in any second or third tier city. Or am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong.
Yeah, it's because of the wide scale availability of mortgages that were subsidized by the government.
But you're also living in a war-torn country right now, so I mean,
No,
I don't
this is
really want to
before the
compare
war.
it.
Before the war.
Okay.
Well, the way things are going in the States, you guys might have your own little civil war. Now, that's
I'm not
gonna be
planning
kind
on
of
packing my bags and like moving to Ukraine and be like, I heard that it's really cheap here.
Yeah, and then the shelling goes over your head while you're signing the papers. Yeah, that happened to me the other day, man. I was like signing some papers and the shell flew over. And I'm like,
oh my gosh! Now you sound like you're living in Chicago. These are the stories I hear about Chicago. That's why we don't want to go there. We're like, I heard of that just random gunfire. We'll just take you out in Chicago any day and every weekend.
No, I gotta say, how the hell did they elect Lori Lightfoot to be the mayor? I mean, she looks like a goblin. She looks like a reject from some sort of sci-fi show where she would have been the villain. What the hell? How did that happen? I don't know.
I think Catherine has left the chat.
I'm still here. I did have to switch out my headphones though, but yeah, I'm actually relatively new to Chicago. I moved here from Palo Alto. Where I also
she is World Economic Forum. Oh yeah.
I was also out of touch with what was going on there. So I mean, the last time I felt I had any idea of what was going on, I lived in Texas, but that was a long time ago now.
Where in Texas were you living?
Outside of Austin.
What part?
Northeast of Austin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now Austin's flooded.
Yeah, Austin's pretty bad. But I mean, people have always just with such crazy determination of wanting to destroy that place. It's kind of incredible.
What do you mean?
I mean, just the way the gentrification happened. A lot of gentrification happens a little bit more organically. People really can't, prices rise. People really have to get moved further and further out. In Austin, it was just sort of Californians and New Yorkers, let's not let New Yorkers off the hook, really were like, how can we destroy this place? And I mean, that's my biased view of it, at least.
Yeah, maybe. It's definitely different now. When I go back to visit, I'm like shocked at how the place I called home for so long is like so completely different. And there's homeless all over the streets now. And it's just like, I had to ask my friends, did I just not notice this before? Was I like stepping over them when I was living here? Or is this something new? And they're like, no, this is new. These people, this wasn't here. This problem wasn't here before.
Just, again, sorry.
I was just going to say, I mean, like rent has gone up like by, I mean, just like orders of magnitude in Austin. I mean, it's like to live in, I mean, just like the middle of nowhere, you're still like I have a friend who lived past the Domain, if you're familiar with it, Kim, and his rent went up, and this is a white collar dude. His rent went up so much he has to move pretty much to San Marcos. So
yeah, wow, that's far.
Yeah,
that's but that's happening. Yeah, same in Boise. I mean, family members, they were renting, and the rent suddenly, people that are on fixed incomes, like either they're retired or they just have a job that like teach. My sister's a teacher. It's like they're not making, each year they don't raise the salary for a teacher by much, right? And suddenly her rent, it was like raised by $600 or $700. And it's like that's how does what's that? Yeah, no one you can't afford that. A person cannot afford that kind of a rent hike. So she had to move out of Boise.
Maria, you were going to say something.
I just wanted to I wanted to say that first it's first thing, it's very interesting that it's very difficult to compare different countries because now I'm listening about the US. I understand that the circumstances of life here is totally different, but they're incomparable. The prices, the US is more oriented to the houses rather than to the flats, and people are seeking to live in the house rather than in the flat. It was historical like that. In Russia, it's totally different. People are more predetermined to live in the flats rather than in the country houses. In Russia, it's much easier and cheaper to buy a flat rather than to rent it. And the same for houses, especially having this credit system that permits to pay it like normally headache free. But because the realities are very different between the two countries, and every time the experts, analysts, or whatever, they're trying to compare even in terms of wages, it's incomparable. It's absolutely uncomparable. It's like two different universes, and nobody can say the wage one is better. We are just different. Yeah,
well, I think that the big difference is that in the United States, you have easy availability of credit in the case of credit cards, credit in the case of mortgage loans. And because you have such easy availability of credit and just a little bit of money every month, then people load up on this credit, and this winds up inflating the price of things.
Yeah.
Whereas in Russia, you have to actually save your money to put together the cash to buy a house or an apartment. And so it gives a completely different kind of mentality.
It's a matter of, yes, exactly. It's a matter of mentality, because Russians are not they don't trust the credit. They always try to either to accumulate a certain sum of money and to buy something rather to go to the bank and take a credit.
Yes.
However, now the things are changing since the banking system has developed intensely in the past years, and you can open the credit right from your mobile and get a credit card. And the things are changing, but slightly, because people can take a credit card to buy something, for holidays or whatever, if they are running out of money. But they will go and buy, for any credit, the flat, but they will calculate properly. Some do not calculate, of course, and there will be a kind of, there are some certain debt crisis in certain families, but still they try to, they don't trust the bank system, and they don't trust the credit. It better are the to live in the apartment they're having and to exchange them on another apartments, let's exchange Also, there are a lot of agencies that help to, for example, to sell your flat at the same time to buy your new one. So it's like, the whole market is following totally different laws. It's and like these two universes are incomparable, because
it probably does come
different.
down. I mean, it probably does come down to the banking system and like you said, the availability of loans and how easy it is in the United States to get credit. I mean, an average person has like 4 or 5 credit cards, a mortgage payment plus a car or 2.
Sure.
Right. I mean, each person has a car with car payment. That's like pretty normal for anybody to have a car with a car payment. Pretty normal for people to have possibly a mortgage, pretty normal to have several credit cards. And that's just like a normal person. And so I think you're right that that has actually been the crux of what has caused the massive inflation, because the banks are happy to lend out money knowing they're going to get a ton of money back in that interest. They're going to get just loads. In fact, we just bought a house and we're moving. We just signed the mortgage documents yesterday. And we were going through, they give you like all the pages for 30 years of what your payment breakdown is, your principal to your interest. And it's like 20 years or something before you even start to pay more on the principal than you are on the, and the fact that and I'm sitting there looking at this thinking this should be illegal. Like, why can the banks front load? And they do it on student loans too. And people don't realize this about student loan payments, is that it's the same exact thing as a mortgage. They front load the interest and they just make you pay all of that up front. It's like any other loan. You'd think, like I've got a PayPal credit card, for example, and it's like the easiest credit card to have because I buy something and then, 6 months later, they start the interest payment. But the interest, my payment when I pay 6 months later is not mostly interest. It's mostly principal. And then the right amount of interest gets added onto that principal. That's like a normal, how you would think interest would work. But what they do instead on these big purchases like mortgages, student loans, probably cars. I didn't look to see what the car, I own my car, but I don't. Similar, right, where they front load the interest. And so people go broke trying to get what they need or what they want or what the bank tells them they can afford. And I do think that you're right that has inflated the price of everything just because the access.
When I was growing up, I heard this stuff of like usury is bad. And when I was younger, I was thinking, oh, that's so much nonsense. Usury is just, lending money. What's wrong with it? And as I've gotten older, I'm realizing, usury is bad because it inflates everything. And it makes you become like this weird little rabbit running after a little bit of money to pay off all of these loans that you have. And you become desperate and panicked. And all of a sudden you realize that if you do lose your income stream from whatsoever source it is, nothing you possess is yours. Because you were talking about the World Economic Forum says, you will own nothing and you will be happy. Well, the fact is, if you have car payments and you miss your car payments, they can take it away. They can just come and repossess it, and there isn't anything you can do legally. You could say, well, I own part of the car. Yeah, but you can't divide the car. It's indivisible. And therefore, it goes back to whoever loaned you the money. And that is basically the notion of the World Economic Forum, of that you will own nothing and you will be happy. You're constantly paying debt. And so if you have a society where the people are discouraged from taking on debt, which is de facto what is happening in Russia, because it's not something that I don't think that the Russian government is trying to dissuade people from taking on loans. But I think that ultimately that is the net effect. I mean,
well, they might not be backing the loans for the bank. I mean, that allowing the banks to just say, oh, okay, well then, if you're just, all right, then we'll just give out a bunch of money because we know that we're going to get a lot of this back, either in a bailout of some kind or something's going to give and I'm going to be able to make this money if this person doesn't make the payment.
Yeah, look, I can tell you from the point of view of an investor, years ago, I invested in student loans and student loan debt in bonds backed by student loans, right? And the guy who sold it to me, worked at an investment bank, and we were talking about it. He said, look, this is free money, risk-free, because you're going to be getting 6% and it's backed by the government. And the beauty of it, he told me when he gave me the sales pitch, was, the students can't get out from under this debt if they declare bankruptcy. They have to pay the student loan no matter what. they can go bankrupt 20 times and they're still going to owe their money on these loans. That's why you will always see it. They will never go bankrupt. It's not like the housing market loans.
Mhm.
And he was right. He was right. And it's basically it's usury on the backs of the young, which is a
Yeah.
disaster. And because
Yeah.
you have all these young people now who are graduating from university, Catherine, you're close to that age bracket who have so much student debt, and they can't start their lives. They can't buy a home. They can't have children. They can't get married because they have the student loan that they have to pay $300, $400, $500, $600, $700 a month, rain or shine, every single time. Am I right, Catherine?
So I'm very lucky. I don't have student loans. I will say I have sympathy for people who do, but it's limited because I do think it's sort of a myth that you have to take on student loans, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people choose expensive colleges for kind of lame reasons. I went to school in New York, and I would just get into fights with people constantly because they protest the cost of our school, but it's like, why are you going to this school when you could just as well go to Hunter College and be in, you're going to be in debt, it'll be 20 grand instead of 250. So, I do think the problem is a lot of people you're right for the most part, but also we make really bad financial decisions. And the problem is that no one points out it's both. It's not simply that I'm a millennial, it's that millennials and Zoomers are irresponsible. We are. But we also, the structure is also kind of unfair. It's two things.
Well, I went to community college and then I went to a state school and I still came out with $30,000 of student debt.
Whoa, how did that happen?
Because that's how much it cost. And then I was shocked to find out. So I'd been paying on the loans for like 15 or 16, a long time. And I called the bank. This was like 3 years ago. And I said, all right, what would be my payoff right now if I were to just try to pay off my student debt? And they said $35,000. And I'm like, wait a minute. I've been paying on these loans for all these years. And, yes, as a new person going out in the world, trying to make a living, there were times I had to pause my student loans because I wasn't, I lost my job. Sure. And I was trying to, when you're young and you're just out of college, you're trying to figure things out. So there were definitely periods of time I had to go into like forbearance or something, or whatever it's called, deferment or something. And they would they still tacked on the interest onto these young people that are just trying to get out there and get their careers going. And so, yeah. And then it turns out that all the payments I made all those years were just profit for them. None of it was my principal.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting here like, so I still owe, and they're like, well, the good news is now pretty much every payment is just principal. So now you're going to finally start paying off your debt. And I'm like, I've been giving you guys hundreds of dollars a month for years. And you're telling me that I haven't even made a dent in the actual debt, that I'm just now starting to pay it off. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that, and people don't understand that about student loans when people are saying, forgive the student loan debt. And it's because they're not realizing these people have paid back the amounts. It's just that they've been paying for the bank to get rich for the last 15 years. And then now they're finally.
Maria, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a question. Having all this amount of problems, you have like very difficult system to live in, like complex, at least how it is looking like from abroad. Having this rising inflation, having like recession, as obviously there is a recession. It's happening worldwide, I think, not only in the United States. It's a global economic crisis we are entering. And how do people in all these circumstances with a huge pile of domestic problems, how do they perceive the foreign policy of the United States taking how much money it is taken out from their own pockets?
Yeah.
I mean,
Catherine, how people do perceive that?
I think I'm gonna bow out of the stream. I'm sorry. It's not really I feel like I'm not really adding positively to discussion. It's not really my wheelhouse. But thank you for the invitation.
Okay, fine.
I mean, I would say for sure, Maria. I think that people are starting to get really angry. And that is why we're seeing a rising anti-war sentiment throughout the population on both sides of the aisle, less so on the left. Now the left kind of switched, and they were usually, typically historically the more anti-war group, but that has shifted. The left has now kind of embraced more of that being pro-war. And now we're seeing the right say, hey, we want to be more, at least, well, it is still on both sides, but it's the anti-establishment, the more the populist crowd that is saying, we don't want all this war. And then the establishment folks are still saying, oh no, but we have all of, we've got to help our Raytheon
obligations.
friends.
Obligations.
We've got all these people that we're still trying to give billions of dollars to. So I do think though that the average and there's more people becoming independent every day, and that independent base is growing and growing and growing. And now I believe there's more independents in the country than there are Republicans and Democrats. And the independents are all saying no more of this. We don't want the war. We didn't vote for this. We're not voting for the amount of money and weapons being sent over to Ukraine. We're not voting for that. That's just happening. And that's the same thing with like all the funds that go to Israel or all the funds that go to Egypt or everywhere in the world. We're sending all this money. And I would like to know on the scale how much money Ukraine gets now compared. I would imagine it's the number one country that we're funding at this point compared to like Israel
what's
and
really
Egypt.
interesting is that when you start like looking at the actual numbers that have gone out there, that are allegedly to have gone out there, and you start really trying to break it down, it becomes really hard because they are fudging the numbers something awful. And it really seems to be that they're recycling this money in the military industrial complex. I mean, a lot of this money that they say, $50 billion go to Ukraine. Yeah, but a big, huge chunk of that is going to go into R&D for Raytheon. And Lloyd Austin, who used to be the CEO of Raytheon, that's perfectly hunky-dory with him insofar as developing more weapons. And how much is actually going to Ukraine? Well, the problem then becomes, you ship that money to Ukraine via either weapons or actual cash. And once it crosses the border, it becomes poof. Nobody knows. And what's fascinating was that, CBS News, you heard about this, Kim, right?
Yeah.
Those of the audience who hasn't heard, I'll just do a quick recap. CBS News did they were going to have a big report about how they estimated that only like 30% of the weapons shipped to Ukraine were actually getting to the front. And first, they had this clip of it, and the clip went viral, and everybody's like, holy cow, CBS is admitting this, which everybody here on the ground knows. And then they removed that clip, and then a couple of days later, they killed the story altogether. They're not going to run this report. And it's true, because
it can be found on my Telegram channel. I have posted it. I have saved it.
Yeah. And the thing is, see, the weapons are showing up on the dark web. People are selling these things. Like, you can get a Javelin for 30 grand, and you can pay either PayPal or Bitcoin, whichever is convenient for you.
My gosh,
dude, this is happening right now, and the Americans are just like shoveling weapons their way. And there's also something else that people aren't talking about insofar as this weapon stuff is concerned. What's really fascinating is a few people noticed it. A couple of months ago, the Zelensky regime ordered all of its soldiers not to criticize the American weapons and the European weapons that were being sent their way. Because, see, the problem with these weapons, these super sophisticated, all kinds of weapons that can practically talk to you. Whoa.
Ooh.
Kim, are you there? Well, no, she'll come back when she comes back. Well, what happened was that the gear doesn't work. And that was bizarre. What happened? I'm wondering what happened to Kim. The gear doesn't work. Oh, there she has come back on.
I'm sorry, I disappeared for a second.
Yeah, what happened?
Yes, not even for a second.
I closed the browser. I didn't mean to close it.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, like I was saying, that the gear that is being sent, the M777 howitzer that they kept talking about, that was the latest wonder weapon at some point. The problem is that you can use it in combat, but only for a limited amount of time, and then you need to repair it, because the weapon system was created so that it would need a constant feeding of spare parts. And the spare parts, of course, the manufacturer would charge an arm and a leg for them, right? And so these weapon systems, they seem to do all the bells and whistles, but they're incredibly fragile and or required all kinds of specialized repair and maintenance, so that the company that manufactured them gets more money. And so they're not working. These M777 howitzers, after a single day, they have to ship them back to Poland to repair, which makes it completely impractical because the war is going on in eastern Ukraine. The same with the HIMARS. The HIMARS, which are supposed to be the latest wonder weapon, well, apart from the fact that they keep getting blown up by the Russians, they also have all kinds of problems. And on top of that, the Russians actually, this is the rumor, and there is enough evidence that is probably correct. The Russians actually bought one of the HIMARS. Is that
not HIMARS? Caesar, French Caesar.
No. They bought a Caesar.
HIMARS also.
HIMARS also. That's the rumor, and it's very they're very serious. Kim, have they mentioned that in the States, or are they keeping mum about that?
Oh, totally, mum. I mean, everything's going great for Ukraine. We need to send them more weapons. We're not hearing. We've been hearing, there was a couple of reports, like you mentioned, the NBC report, or was it NBC? Which was it? CBS?
CBS.
Yeah. So the CBS report saying 30%, or was it only 30% are making it in, or 30% are not? Yeah.
No, 30% making it to the front. Yeah.
And then the only other report we're seeing is, but at least these stories are kind of starting to break through, right? So they're kind of like, maybe this isn't. And then Amnesty International said that that they were using basically civilians as human shields in a way. And then Zelensky, of course, came out and said, "How dare you? How dare you report on this?"
I'm putting on my Greta Thunberg accent. Yeah. How dare you?
Yeah, and so forcing Amnesty International. I don't know if they've actually retracted or anything from this, but certainly getting the mob against Amnesty International, saying, "How dare you?" And so we are starting to at least see, and this is the first time, Western media actually saying things aren't all roses. So, because up to this point, until like this week, until this week, it was just Russians are being slaughtered, Ukraine's winning, send them more weapons so they can win more. And it was just, okay, but we see the land being swallowed up, right? We see like the reality of what's happening. And now you've got Zelensky posing for Vogue on the same day saying to people, evacuate because the Russians are coming. And so it's like, which is it? Are you winning or are you not? Or are you winning or are you evacuating? And if you're evacuating, it doesn't sound like you're winning.
It is the same story as in case of the assault on Kherson. You remember, Hanzala? They said it was a psychological pressure to frighten the Russians. Yeah.
Well, what happened was that starting in like March or April, something like that, they started saying that they were going to have this huge offensive in August, and that they was going to be in Kherson. Kherson is in the south of Ukraine, just to the north of the Crimean Peninsula, and they were going to have this huge offensive, and then well, nothing was coming, nothing was happening. And finally, yesterday, some guy, who was it, who came out that it was all just a psychological ploy to intimidate the Russians? And the Russians now have something like 30,000 troops there. And I guess they were thinking that maybe, this is going to be real. And now they have a force that could just start advancing from Kherson. It's just this complete banana republic kind of bullshit war. It's just all lies. And the thing that I find so disconcerting is that Americans seem to passively accept all of these lies. That's what it seems like over here. Is that the case?
Yeah, for sure. But I think it is waning. There was definitely rabid support for Ukraine in the very beginning and a lot of anti-Russian sentiment. And that has certainly started to dwindle. I think I'm not even sure. I would think maybe still the majority support, and are saying, yeah, we need to still send weapons and we need to be doing that's hard to say, actually. I'm not 100% certain on the percentage of people anymore, just because we're seeing inflation hit us so hard. We're seeing that it's not working, right? That giving Ukraine a bunch of weapons is not resulting in a better outcome for them. In fact, people are starting to say what I've been saying all along, which is just negotiate. There's no way to win this.
Absolutely.
This is going to be bad. And the better thing to do is to try to make peace with your neighbor that you've had a very long history with. and it's like a very bad divorce. And it's just like, it's better to just try to mend this in some way. But, you know, I think a lot of people are now coming around to that and realizing too many lives have been lost. Too much has been destroyed. It's really unnecessary. We get the point, you know, I feel like Ukraine should just be to say to Russia at this point, okay, we get the point, like arms down, we get the point. But they're not, you know, they're fighting until the last Ukrainian.
And but this divorce is even unnatural. It was artificially created.
Right.
Absolutely. It was made up from A to Z, because like it was used and abused. The problem between the two, let's say the two countries, they were existing, because since Ukraine itself is divided on the western part and the eastern part, and eastern is always inclined to be more pro-Russian and, you know, speaking Russian language. And even if when we are watching the videos with the posts with Ukrainian prisoners of war, all of them are speaking perfect Russian, even being from the western Ukraine. So we are living in the same, let's say, we have the same cultural background. We have been raised on the same movies and the same cartoons and the same books. I like Russians, other Ukrainian culture. Personally, I love cooking Ukrainian food. I love Ukrainian songs. I sing some of them for myself. And it's, you know, there is no hatred towards Ukrainians as a culture at all inside the Russian society. But there is extreme hatred now from the Ukrainian side toward everything Russian. And it was existing before even the current the current crisis. And now I'm just from time to time getting to the chart of the Donetsk city, and there are like in the channel it's around 300,000 people, and in the chart there's around 1,000. And it is shocking when the Ukrainians are coming there just for the sake of saying how much they want them all to die. People are living permanently under the shelling for 8 years, and here comes people from the other side of the battlefield who wishing them all to die just because they're Russians and they're pro-Russian. And it is so shocking. It's giving so much shivers, because people can the mainstream can say that it's not true, that there is no such things, there is no divide inside the Ukraine, and it's just all Russia's propaganda. But anybody can just go to Telegram and to find this channel, Donetsk CP, and to find this chat and to find out what's happening in reality and what the level of hatred between the two sides and who sparked it.
Yeah. Well, you're putting together a documentary, Maria, aren't you? Why don't you talk to us about it?
Actually, it's something very dear to me and very important to me, because as you know, I'm following the conflict since day one, and I'm not even following it, I'm living through it, because it's something really that what makes my heart bleed. And I was since as those who are following me since the time of Al Arabi and Arab News, you know that perfectly, that all my columns, whatever the conflict I was covering, I was always pro-human beings. I was not siding with any side of the conflict. I hate politics because politics destroys lives. It divides, it never unites. And I was always pro-human. And following the conflict, I was seeing how the things were developing, and how the looming home from the Minsk agreements, and then understanding that they are not working. And for all this time, I was following up with all the people who were living there and who were living permanently under the shelling, and every day living for all these years as their last. And but at least the coverage, if we at least Google the time frame before 2022, we'll find many articles revealing how Ukrainian side was shelling the same Donetsk for all this time. There were lots of reports, even from the Amnesty International, from United Nations. And at least it was a kind of fair reporting, because, let's say, crimes from both sides were reported, and the tragedies from both sides were reported. But since 2000, they started since February, there is no other side at all. It's silenced, as if people are not dying, as if Ukraine is not shelling Donetsk with these awful and disastrous mines, these butterfly mines that are getting into the grass and they are killing kids, children who are just playing all around and they don't see where they're stepping. They are damaging and hurting the elders, they making of them handicaps. Lots of people, around 40 people in the past 2 days were wounded from these mines. And all these people became totally silenced in the media. And so this idea of the film emerged. The film title is The Human Face of the War. We're making it with my team. It's an independent creative association. We are calling like this. I'll tell a bit if you're interested, okay, why this title. And the main purpose of the film is to make these voices extremely loud, even to the most deafened hearts and ears. It's a message of peace. We want to share we don't want to talk at all. We don't talk to politics. Only our heroes will tell their stories. We want to make them being heard, being listened to, and to make this a kind of message of peace and demand just to listen and to understand that the situation is far more complex and the people are dying. Normal people are dying. And for me, all lives matter. There is no lives that are more superior than the others. All lives matter. And this, the whole thing that is like, let's say, the whole concept of the film I'm working on.
The link to the fundraising page is in the description below. Go check it out, please.
Thank you. And yes,
amazing.
it's true. Yes, and it's true that we want to realize this film completely on the donations from around the globe, from the people who care. And even why the association is called We, because, and even those who will go to the donation link, they will see the logo of our team. And it's full of meanings, because the circle, it is the earth we are living in. And we, it is us. There is we are, first of all, we are the human beings. And as the Beatles were saying, all we need is love. And we need to listen to each other. That's the ideal.
That's the ideal.
Yes, that's something we should work on. And even our anthem of our team is a famous song by Michael Jackson, "We Are the World." We are the children. And if you will go, you will go.
Now we're gonna have to break out, the little ukulele and start a kumbaya thing. But
that sounds great.
Like to listen to the songs, because I think that such songs are getting to the past, and maybe people forget even the lyrics. But check it out, because it's exactly what we're dreaming of. Because we are united when we can make a better day altogether.
Sounds great.
It sounds great. Listen, ladies, it's been terrific talking with you guys. We've been going on a little bit over an hour. I think that it's been a delightful conversation. I want to thank you both for having come on, and Catherine D, great having had you on as well. And I'm really looking forward to doing another show with both of you. It would be a delight, as always.
Absolutely.
Chat, I want to thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the show, and I will catch you guys next time.